Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts. Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Well, this evening we are continuing a series you may or may not have been aware of. And the series has really been an opportunity that was started on November 1st, the first Wednesday of November, where we were assessing where we were in all of these tumultuous changes that our community has been through with the storm and the ways in which many of us have been affected directly, and those of us who have been witnesses to that effect and really feeling some of those emotions. And so we encourage that feeling, those things that we didn't really want to talk about and the things we didn't really want to feel. Because sometimes they're ugly and despairing, and we're not that person, are we? And yet we still feel those things, and we know that as we share them and speak them and own them, we move through them far more quickly than if we hide them or deny them. And that we turn to each other and to reconnect with support, to grow through and get through what comes to us. Last week we had a wonderful guest speaker in Reverend Greg Coles, who taught us about letting go and freeing ourselves from our own suffering when we resist whatever is, right? He taught us to drop the banana, after all. And if you don't know what that means because you weren't here, we have it saved on the Facebook page. You can watch the whole thing again. And you don't want to miss it because there was a great video in there too, maybe more than one. I can't remember, but I remember one in particular that I loved. And tonight, we're going to take it another step further. Tonight, we're going to be talking about how it is that when things happen, when we lose things, when loss happens, when unexpected turns of event, things we didn't plan or choose happen to us, that as we go through those stages of feeling our feelings, of having our temper tantrums, of raging against the wind, and also letting go, finally, of realizing that it's time just to let go and get on, right? That as we do that, there comes a time when we can take sort of a step onto the platform and take a look at, what does this mean now? How then shall I live? How do I integrate what has happened and begin to recognize that perhaps I am living a new life, a life I didn't plan, but a life that is now taking me in a different direction, and that a recognition that I really can't go back to the life I had before and feel that loss. So as we integrate what has happened and what the results are now, what does it all mean? Continuing to integrate the change in our lives, we arrive at a point where we are ready to make those new meanings of our experience. Joseph Campbell, a wonderful teacher, one of my personal spiritual teachers, he didn't know it. I think he died before I knew about him. But Joe, if you're hearing me, I really think you're awesome. And so what he said here is, life, he says, is without meaning. You bring the meaning to it. The meaning of life is whatever you ascribe it to be. Being alive is the meaning. And so it includes establishing new relationships, doesn't it? With those persons we've lost or those things that have been taken from us. We have new meanings, we make new meanings for what it means to us now, what has been lost, and what it is that we're trying to reestablish in our lives. That's how we acquire wisdom and resilience and renewed hope for the future. Because we have come out on the other side once again. Hermann Hesse says, I have always believed, and I still believe, that whatever good or bad fortune may come our way, we can always give it meaning and transform it into something of value. Notice he doesn't qualify it. He doesn't say only if I choose it, only if I made it happen, only if it was part of my plan. No, he says anything, everything, that there is some core of eternity in us. There is some core of perfection that does not touch, diminished, or changed by anything that happens to us. There is some place from deep within us that we are untouched by whatever happens. And therefore, from that strength, draw forth the ability to integrate, to create anew, and to find a way to call even this good. One of my great person I admire a lot is Rachel Naomi Remen as an author, and she's written 2 books, and tonight I have an excerpt from each of her books. I just find her so insightful and so rich and so juicy. And so this is one thing that she has written in her book called My Grandfather's Blessing. She says, an oyster is soft, tender, and vulnerable. Without the sanctuary of its shell, it could not survive. But oysters must open their shells in order to breathe water. Sometimes while an oyster is breathing, a grain of sand will enter its shell and become a part of its life from then on. Such grains of sand cause pain, but an oyster does not alter its soft nature because of this. It does not become hard and leathery in order not to feel. It continues to entrust itself to the ocean, to open and to breathe water in order to live. But it does respond. Slowly and patiently, the oyster wraps the grain of sand in thin, translucent layers until over time it has created something of great value in the place where it was most vulnerable to its pain. A pearl might be thought of as an oyster's response to its suffering. Not every oyster can do this. Oysters that do are far more valuable to people than oysters that do not. Sand is a way of life for an oyster. If you are soft and tender and must live on the sandy floor of the ocean, making pearls becomes a necessity if you are to live well. Disappointment and loss are a part of every life. Many times, we can put such things behind us and get on with the rest of our lives, but not everything is amenable to this approach. Some things are simply too big, too deep to do this. And we will have to leave important parts of ourselves behind if we treat them in this way. These are the places where wisdom begins to grow in us. It begins with suffering that we do not avoid or rationalize or put behind us. It starts with the realization that our loss, whatever it is, has become a part of us and has altered our lives so profoundly that we cannot go back to the way it was before. Something in us can transform such suffering into wisdom. The process of turning pain into wisdom looks like a sorting process. First, we experience everything, and then one by one, we let things go. The anger, the blame, the sense of injustice, and finally, even the pain itself, until all we have left is a deeper sense of the value of life and a greater capacity to live it. Viktor Frankl, who was in a concentration camp, survived a concentration camp in the Holocaust, famously wrote Man's Search for Meaning in these words. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. What's really important when things happen to us that we didn't choose is that we rediscover choice. Because that's where our power is. That's where our identity is. And that is where our truth is. We are not defined by what happens to us. We are not diminished by what we lose, what gets taken away, what falls away, what ages us. We are eternal beings. And in this eternity that infills us comes the eternal opportunity to recreate, to take whatever happens and make something new out of it. And rejoice, because life continues. And that's the thing, not the thing. Rachel Naomi Remen wrote Kitchen Table Wisdom. This comes from that book. She says, another of my patients, she sees patients and works with people who have cancer and are at the end of their lives at times, or just in a healing process. So she's talking about one of her patients who's a successful businessman. She says, tells me that before his cancer, he would become depressed unless things went a certain way he wanted them to go. He said happiness was like having a cookie. If you had the cookie, things were good. If you didn't have the cookie, life wasn't worth a damn. Unfortunately, the cookie kept changing. Some of the time it was money, sometimes power, sometimes sex. At other times it was the new car, the biggest contract he could get, the most prestigious address. A year and a half after his diagnosis of prostate cancer, he sits shaking his head ruefully in my office. He says, it's like I stopped learning how to live after I was a kid. When I give my son a cookie, he's happy. If I take the cookie away or it breaks, he's unhappy. But he's 2.5, and I'm 43. It's taken me this long to understand that the cookie will never make me happy for very long. The minute you have the cookie, it starts to crumble, or you start worrying about it crumbling, or about someone trying to take it away from you. You know, you have to give up a lot of things to take care of the cookie, to keep it from crumbling and be sure that no one takes it away from you. You may not even get a chance to eat it because you're so busy just trying not to lose it. Having the cookie, however, is not what life is about. My patient then laughs and says how cancer has changed him. He says for the first time he's happy. No matter if his business is doing well or not, no matter if he wins or loses at golf. He says, 2 years ago, cancer asked me, okay, what's important? What's really important? And so my answer now is life is important. Life. Life any way you can have it. Life with the cookie, life without the cookie. Happiness does not have anything to do with the cookie. It has to do with being alive. Before, he said, who made the time, you know? And then he thinks, pauses, and says, damn, I guess life is the cookie. Henry David Thoreau says, there's no value in life except what you choose to place upon it, and no happiness in any place except what you bring to it yourself. Dag Hammarskjöld said, I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering. But at some point, some moment, I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful and that therefore my life in self-surrender had a goal. You see, no matter what happens, we are the meaning makers. That is our eternal power. It is our gift. We take a look at what is spread before us. No matter what our judgments are, no matter what our disappointments may be, no matter what our treasures are, and we somehow spoon them together, thread them together. We create something different. We rearrange them, and we grow just a little bit less attached because we've learned that the cookie doesn't matter so much anymore. Feel your feelings, no matter what happens. Share them with those you trust and who love you and whom you love. Speak your truth. Drop the banana. Free yourself from things you're attached to or too obsessive about that aren't serving anymore. And make new meanings for the new life that stretches out before you endlessly. William Martin, who wrote the Sage's Tao Te Ching, says, crack yourself open. What use is it to continue to hide behind your facades and your roles? Why waste your energy playing games? Isn't it time to cry your tears, to shout your passion, to dance like Zorba, and to let your soul touch the soul of the world? Because after all, the world is your oyster. God bless you all.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.